What would you say if I told you that you might be better off without a New Year's resolution? You're probably thinking like I am, yes, of course, they're a big farce. They're just destined for failure, because it does seem like that anything that has resolution attached to it, especially at the beginning of the year, is destined for failure. It's almost like it's packaged with a white flag that you're supposed to hoist after like 3 or 4 days or 3 or 4 weeks, or at the most 3 or 4 months. I was reading a survey where it said that the average New Year's resolution lasts a whopping 3.74 months. That means before April, you're hoisting the white flag. I think it tends to be a little bit sooner than that. If you happen to go to a gym, you know how packed it is in January and February, then it really starts to thin out. I saw a survey by ABC News that said that 80% failed by mid-February. Now, you can pick your number, whether it's a few weeks, a few months, whatever it might be. But regardless, before the mid-year, you're pretty much done with your New Year's resolution. But what if I told you there was a better way? What if there was a better way to pursue those things that you want to improve in your life and to pursue the values that you have in your life? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome, everyone, to the Full Life Podcast by Grace Church. We hope to inspire, challenge, and clarify your next steps in faith. I'm David Lawson, and today we're going to be talking about the indispensable value of self-leadership. And my guest today is Dan Owolabi, who is the Executive Director of Branches Worldwide and is also the author of this book, Authentic Leadership: How to Lead with Nothing to Hide, Nothing to Prove, and Nothing to Lose. Welcome, Dan.
It's good to be here.
I'm really glad that you're here today, because I think this is a really, especially at the beginning of the year, when we're talking about setting these goals for ourselves and, dare I say, resolutions, I think this idea of self-leadership is something that tends to be overlooked.
Right. I would 100% agree. And I think oftentimes when we think about wanting to do things or getting excited by doing things, we're thinking primarily about the goal and not so much about what it takes to accomplish the goal. And I think that's where people tend to go wrong.
Yeah. Now, you know as well as I do, this podcast grew out of a sermon series we're doing here at Grace called Turning the Beat Around. Right. And it's about establishing new rhythms in our lives. Actually, you're going to be teaching in that series. And what we're looking to do is establish new rhythms in our lives that will have positive outcomes for us when it comes to our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, those sorts of things. But when I look at the topics that are associated with this series, they look very resolution-esque. Like we're going to be talking about things like time, health, finances, relationships, devotions, those sorts of things. These are things that usually get on the list of people when we talk about resolutions. But we're not going to be talking about them in the same way, are we? We're going to be talking about a different approach.
Yeah, that's right. I think for us, we're talking about a gospel approach. We really want to make sure that everything we're doing is centered on the way that God is forming us and then how we can influence the people around us for the sake of his kingdom and his causes.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk about the self-leadership side of things. And I remember reading in your book, and maybe this is a place we can, a launching place for us in this book. I liked what you said about self-leadership, and you said that self-leadership allows you to fulfill promises you make to yourself.
Yeah.
That's really what we want to do, isn't it? When it comes down to it, that's what we want. When we talk about addressing these issues in our lives that we want to improve on, pursuing the values in our life, these are promises that we're making to ourselves.
Absolutely. It starts with that. I mean, I think there's another level of confidence that comes when you're able to say, hey, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. And then you actually do every week.
Right.
When you're able to do that, then you can look at somebody across the table and you say, hey, I'm going to show up at your birthday party on time, or I'm going to deliver this in this way. And you know you will, because you've had a habit of keeping promises first to yourself and then to people outside of just yourself, right? That level of confidence becomes contagious.
And you start building little momentum. Like you get some quick wins under your belt, and it helps you, right?
Absolutely.
What would you say, and I know you've talked to a lot of people, made a lot of observations about this, what would you say would be some of the warning signs that self-leadership is weak in your life?
Yeah, I think so. There's some obvious ones. That's a great question. The obvious ones I think would be over-promising and under-delivering, right? You haven't taken the time to really assess what you can do and how long it'll take. And so you lean hard on verbal commitments as opposed to actually knowing that you can deliver on something. And so I think when you take an honest self-assessment and you say, these are the disciplines that I have, This is the kind of person that I am. This is what I want to do on a day-to-day basis. And then you turn and you look to someone and you say, I will do that, right? When you're able to do that with confidence, then that's a whole nother level. But if you can't do that, then oftentimes people will overpromise and then they'll end up under-delivering because they didn't really understand what it took to deliver in a way that really helped them keep their promise.
Yeah, and that reminds me to ask you, what are some of the pitfalls and maybe some of the detractors or distractions that you see that keeps us from fulfilling those promises that we make to ourselves, to other people? We might not really be lying to ourselves as much as we might not just have what it takes to, it's aspirational, we don't do it. But what are some of those things that kind of get in the way of us fulfilling those promises?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes when it comes to keeping promises to yourself and to other people, over-promising, under-delivering, it's saying yes too quickly. Oftentimes people will say, yep, I'll do that, when really they don't take the time to think, can I actually do that? They say yes, then they're like, how am I going to do that? That happens a lot for people because of relationships. They want to please people. That happens all the time. It's difficult to say no to people that you love. So that's one pitfall. I think another thing is, and you mentioned the word momentum. Oftentimes it takes, days, months, years of specific actions to get to a place where you can actually deliver on a promise that you make to somebody. And so oftentimes people they'll say, hey, I'll do this, but really they just don't have the capacity there's just no way that they can do that. And so being able to be upfront and say, I don't think that I can do that, or I don't think I have the margin in my life to do that, or I don't think I have the talent or the capacity or whatever makes a big difference.
Well, you talk about that in your book a little bit, about this consistency and developing this pattern. And one of the things you talked about was a roadmap for self-leadership. And you talked about 4 stages of competence.
Right.
And I want to get to that. I actually want to talk about each one of those stages, and maybe you can apply each one of them to a particular area of our life, whether it be spiritual or physical or emotional or whatever. But before we get into the specifics, can you kind of give us a high altitude view of that? Like, what is this roadmap, and what is it ultimately going to try to accomplish in our lives?
Yeah, so it's a helpful roadmap in that if you think about, for example, let's say you live in Ohio, that's where we are right now, and you're trying to go to California, which is on the other side of the United States, and it's going to take you about a week and a half. A roadmap really helps you plan well. And it helps you understand, okay, it's going to take X number of days to get there. So I should expect this when I get to this state, this when I get to this state. I should stop for gas at this place. Having a roadmap helps you plan long term. This is a roadmap, and I love that you use that word when it comes to self-discipline. It helps you understand when you first start, you're going to feel like this. And then about halfway through, you're going to feel like this. Everybody does it. It's not you. It's just a universal thing. And then when you get to this stage, you're going to feel this way. And so you can almost expect those things. And when they happen, you're not surprised. You don't think that you're the one that's, messing up. This is part of the process. And going through the process gets you to where you want to go. And so by knowing that, you won't quit midway through because you're doing something wrong. You'll keep going because this is part of the overall process.
You slipped in the word discipline here. What do you see as the relationship between discipline and self-discipline and self-leadership? Are they the same? Do they just have something in common? Is one predicated on the other? How do you think about that?
That's a great question, Dave. So self-leadership is really about a combination of having a clear vision for where you want to go, and then having a plan to get there, step by step over time. I think discipline sometimes really just feels punitive. It just feels like, yeah, I'm going to eat broccoli every day because I'm supposed to. Not zero vision for where I want to go or why. I'm just going to do it because it's Tuesday, and that's a terrible way to live. But self-leadership really is this combination of both vision and plan. It says, I want to be this kind of person, not just I want to get here, but I want to be this kind of person. And if I work backwards, this kind of person that I want to be is the kind of person that does this and this and this and this. Therefore, to get there, I'm going to start by doing this small thing today. And I'll move on and add to that tomorrow.
I like that because you have to have both. In order to fulfill the vision, you need to have the discipline, but discipline without vision ends up being frustrating. Right?
And painful.
Yeah. And painful. Yeah. Painful. That's right. Just running every day and not ever choosing to run a marathon or something is not very good, right?
That's right.
It's painful. It's just painful.
Yeah. And discipline, oftentimes, it feels like it's imposed on us, like somebody's making me do this, therefore. But when you're leading yourself, you're really thinking about, hey, who do I want to be? And who's God made me to be? And that kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about each one of these steps along the way. And the first two, I have to admit, weren't very flattering. I wasn't too jazzed when I saw the title, the subtitle. I thought, I don't really want to read about this because they're not very flattering. So here's the first one: unconscious incompetence. Now, this is the first step in this pathway, and both of these words are very negative. Unconscious incompetence. What do you mean by that?
It's funny. Yeah, I actually have never heard that before, because you're right. Both words are very unflattering. So when we think about unconscious incompetence, this is a state that most of us are in, right? So if I approach you, Dave, and I say, hey, Dave, and let's say you're not as smart as you were, and I said, hey, do you think that you could climb Mount Everest? And you had no idea. You're in the state of unconscious incompetence. You don't know. And you also are very bad at climbing Mount Everest, so you're unconsciously incompetent. You don't even know how bad you are. And most of us, when we think about doing difficult things, we just really have no conception of how difficult the thing is that we're trying to do. There's this great video on YouTube. There's a guy named Brian Scalabrine, and he is like the scrub of all scrubs when it comes to playing in the NBA. He's this big, tall, gangly guy. He was in the NBA for a long time and didn't score very many points, sat on the end of the bench for years. Anyway, he came up with this YouTube channel and said, I am better than even the best Division I basketball player because I played in the NBA. Right. People didn't believe it. And so he, bring these people on that people kind of knew, and they played, college basketball and that kind of stuff. He would destroy them. Really? Destroy them. And he was essentially showing them that, hey, look, I'm in the NBA. I might be really bad, but I'm in the NBA. And he would basically reveal people's unconscious incompetence. You think you're good, you're actually not even close to anyone in the NBA. And it's just this funny thing that he would do. And that's the point.
Yeah. Even with our spiritual lives, when we think about, sometimes I'll talk to people about, because they want to establish this pattern of reading their Bible every day and praying every day and so forth. And I think they have this unconscious understanding of what it's going to take. Now, it seems really simple. I'll read a verse a day. But sometimes they'll start with, well, I'm going to read through the Bible in a year. I'm going to read like 3 or 4 chapters every day, and that's where they start. Or they'll say, I want to start studying the Bible, so I'm going to start in the book of Revelation. Well, maybe you should start somewhere else. Let's start with the book of John. Let's read 1 chapter a day.
Yeah, James,
something like that. It's just something that's, I don't think we understand.
That's it.
The toll that it'll task us day after day to do it, distractions that come into place, 100%. Life gets in the way, that sort of stuff. Yep. And so I think having a healthy understanding of walking into that is kind of being alert that we have this unconscious incompetence is helpful for us, because it causes us to step back and say, okay, what am I really after here? And is this what I'm really willing to tackle? Is
exactly
that right?
Yep. And once you get into it, you realize everybody has that sense of unconscious incompetence. It's a normal part of trying something new and hard, and you get into it, you're like, oh wow, this is way more difficult than I thought. And then you decide, right? Do I want to do this or not?
And there's a lot I got to learn. I might need to talk to some people. I might need to do a little research on something, whatever it might be.
Exactly right.
The next stage isn't very flattering either, but at least there's a positive word in there: conscious incompetence, which might actually be worse. Do you want to know that you're incompetent here? It's like, I know I'm really bad at this.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think there is this moment where you recognize, okay, I realize how difficult this is. I'm now conscious of it, and I'm also very bad. Like, that is a hard place to be. I tell a story of in the book about my wife teaching me how to drive stick shift. And, for a long time, I thought driving standard is easy. How hard can it be? And so I'm in this unconscious incompetence stage where I have no idea. And then she tries to teach me. And I get stuck in this middle of the intersection in Canton, and people are honking, and I can't go forward. And I'm prideful, and I will not let her take over. Yeah. And that's that moment of conscious incompetence where I'm like, I am really bad at this, and I just can't get past that. And I think, honestly, if you look at the Bible, God repeatedly puts us in positions of conscious incompetence, where we constantly think that we are better than we are. And he constantly is trying to show you need more help than you think you do. And so those moments are moments of realization, and honestly, moments of repentance. Lord, I'm sorry I was so prideful. But then there's something after that, right? You don't just sit there and go back, or you don't just give up and quit, but you do realize I need to do more work than I initially thought, right? That can be a really good place for people.
Yeah, and to continue the example about reading your Bible, you might get to the point in the unconscious incompetence that I had no idea what I was getting in for.
Right.
This is something I really want to do, but I realize it's more than I've ever done before,
Yep.
and I don't have any experience with it, whatever.
Right.
And people, just start getting discouraged with it.
And they get discouraged when they read the Bible, typically at like Numbers,
Yeah,
or
right.
like Leviticus. They're like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And this just never ends. Like there's months
That's
of
exactly
this.
right. Yeah. So if you're out there and you're wondering about where should you used to start reading the Bible, talk to Dan or myself. We can help you get started with that.
We'll help you.
But you're saying this conscious incompetence part is where people tend to quit. Why is that? Why do they tend to quit there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that phase of conscious incompetence is socially embarrassing. Like it is, to really grow, you have to be able to go through sort of, if you're doing it publicly, if you're going to the gym or reading the Bible or whatever, and you told people you would and that kind of stuff, you have to struggle for a long time, really, to develop the muscles and the habits and all the things you need to actually get good at something. It is hard. And if people ask you how it's going, or people watch you fail over and over again, socially and even intellectually, and sometimes even spiritually, it's easy to get discouraged and say, I don't need this. Like life was better before I even started.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back again.
Yeah.
And you find that over and over and over again. And that's why a roadmap and a clear vision and a compelling reason to do something is really key, because that compelling reason will push you through that moment of, wow, this is embarrassing and I see no end in sight and I really do want to quit. But man, God's called me to this. Or I know I'm in the middle of the process. I'm not going to quit in the middle, right? I've got, 3 more weeks of this and then I'll get through it and I'll be better. That kind of thing really helps out.
Yeah, and having some people around you at this juncture, having people
Support.
around you, supporting you, encouraging you,
Huge.
right?
Yep.
That's very important.
People who won't let you quit. They'll say,
I like
hey,
that.
you know what? I love you too much to let you stay the way
Right.
you were. You're not going back. Let's
Right.
keep going together.
Yeah, that's good. Really good. I like this next stage. Everybody's happier to get here. Conscious competence.
Yes.
Both as I know I'm making progress. That's what that sounds like to me.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's where the stage where you realize, okay, I am actually better than I was last month. I'm not as good as I want to be, but I'm better than I used to be.
Yeah.
And that feeling feels good. That's when you start to gain some momentum. It's still hard. You still have to think about everything you're doing. So you still have to tell yourself to wake up in the morning and read the Bible. You still have to say, I'm going to get to moments where I don't really want to do this and it's really difficult. But you start to see, the scale move,
Yep.
or you start
Yep.
to see results with your family, or you start to see the revenue come in with your business, or you start to really remember verses. Like those are the things that
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm seeing results from the work I'm putting in. Not as much as I would like to, but I'm feeling something.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be.
That is a really good place to be. And that seems to me to be the tipping point. It's like when we get to that point,
Yep.
it seems like, okay, we are on the road somewhere and we're making progress and I'm not going back now.
That's it. That's exactly it. And what's funny about that moment is it happens over and over and over again in our lives. It happens when we are parenting. It happens when we're building a business. It happens when we're trying to lose weight. It happens when we're trying to attend church more frequently. Everything that we do is uphill. That is worthwhile. And when we get to a certain place, we realize, okay, this is getting better, but we have to stick with it long enough to
Right.
get to that tipping point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the last one is like, I don't know. This is like heaven on earth, right? We get this next one. Unconscious competence. It's like, I'm doing it and I'm succeeding and I don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about
That's
there?
a really good place to be. I call this like Michael Jordan mode, right? Where you're dribbling down the court and
In the zone.
You do it exactly. You're in the zone. You do an amazing move, and people are like, "How did you do that?" And you're like, "I don't know. I just can do it." Riding a bike is a lot like that for us. And I'll use this example from time to time. My mom, she grew up in Nigeria, and she never learned to ride a bike, right? So she's in her upper 60s now at this point. And to learn to ride a bike at this stage is hard, because guess what? She has to go through all those things. Like she has to, unconscious incompetence, then conscious incompetence, and now she has to fall a couple times. And it's hard to do that when you're in your 60s. And then she has to do it when she's, then she has to do the conscious competence, and then finally to that place of finally unconscious competence, like everyone else. So those are the things that everybody goes through.
Yeah, and as an athlete, you're an athlete. There's nothing like practicing your skill to the point where all you have to do is think about the game. You don't have to think about what you're doing, right? And your skills just kind of take over.
That's it.
Because they've just been so ingrained.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of examples of this, isn't there? I mean, not just in athletic. I mean, how many free throws do you think Michael Jordan shot in his like 3-pointers, whatever?
So
I mean,
many,
Kobe Bryant, these guys who have done it, violinists, all these artists who are out there who have these hours and hours of practice. One of the words I think you used when you're talking about this stage is it becomes ingrained in you. Talk a little bit more about that. What does it take for something to get ingrained in us?
Yeah. I think it's ingrained in you. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think it's ingrained in you when you're able to do it and not even think about it. And you can do it and not even think about it when you're thinking about other things while you're doing it. It is so natural that it takes up zero brain power, and you're able to think about all the other things that are happening in your life while you're doing this one thing in front of you with excellence. And it's an amazing feeling to turn around and watch other people struggle, and it's challenging for them. And you're like, wow, I guess this is hard for some people. And that's when you know that you're at that place.
But this is where we all want to start.
Yeah.
when we make a decision, hey, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to improve my spiritual disciplines, or I'm going to grow my business, whatever. This is where we want to start. But it just doesn't work out that way, does it?
It never does. And honestly, you shouldn't want it to, because I think when you get through all of those phases, you become a different kind of person. And it's that kind of person that you want. You don't so much want the goal, but you want to be the kind of person who can go through the challenges again and again and again. You want that grit. That is the most valuable thing, as opposed to the goal itself.
Yeah. And there is, when you get to this point with a particular discipline or a particular pursuit, talk about how that influences and how it affects your confidence for future pursuits that you need to take and you need to grasp hold of. Is there like this carryover for it, or do you have to are the first stages just as hard the next time as they were for the first time?
Yeah,
be honest.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is. I mean, it is hard to do things that are new. It's hard to fail for a long period of time. It's hard to not see results when you're putting in a lot of effort day in and day out. It's just really hard. But when you've gone through this cycle once or twice, and Dave, you're a great example of this, right? So you played professional baseball for a little bit. You've got a PhD. I have a hard time thinking that those two things are not interrelated. To get a PhD, you just can't be smart. Like, you can't just have to read books. You have to be able to go through rejection and failure, and the paper's not good enough, and I'm trying 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 for years now, and I'm still trying. I'm not there yet, and then finally get it. Like, those things really come from the same muscles that you learned when you were, playing pro baseball, right? Just failure, and then success. And so I think when you know that that's the arc of excellence, to get where I want to go, I have to go through that.
That sounds like a book title, Arc of Excellence.
Ooh, I like that.
You should do that.
Maybe it's already been written. But when you know that,
yeah,
and you're like, okay, to get to this place of excellence, I have to go through this stuff. You put your boots on, you put your pants on. You're like, all right, here we go. It's going to hurt. And I'm here for it.
Yeah, I do think success in one area, at least one area, and I'm sure that our listeners can look at other areas. Maybe they should borrow from areas in their past where they've had to make this. Well, I've done this before, and I've proven to myself that I can do it. That I've done it before. All I'm doing is taking those same principles and I'm applying it to another area that seemed impossible to me, but it's not.
Yes, that's 100% true.
Yeah, years ago, my mom, remember standing at the kitchen counter, and my mom was reading through the Old Testament. And during the journey of the Israelites, every once in a while, they would have to put up these stone altars, these piles of rocks, and they all commemorated something significant that God did.
Yes.
And then the scripture tells us that when your children or your grandchildren ask you about this, you get to tell the story.
Wow.
She's told me, she said, David, she said, you'd be wise to build your rocks, your piles of rocks.
That's it.
And then when you get down the road in your life, look back and tell the story about what God did. I think we have more of those in our lives than we give ourselves credit for. They might not be as significant or as substantial as what we're pursuing now, but they have prepared us. Wouldn't you agree to that? They've prepared us for the task that is ahead of us now in order to become the person that we want to be, to pursue the values that we want to pursue in our lives.
100%. I love every sentence that you just said, because I think the life of the Israelites is just indicative of the life of a Christian. and being able to put those markers down is really helpful, because I think you start telling yourself a different kind of story. Like you're able to start telling yourself, hey, I'm the kind of person that does things like this. I'm the kind of person that can do hard things because I have done them, and therefore I can do them. So therefore this one is not impossible for me. Like that story you tell yourself is so empowering.
Yeah.
As opposed to, yeah, I'm not built for this.
Yeah.
Or no, I probably should quit because this isn't worth it. Like those stories come in too.
Right. As a follower of Christ, one of the reasons we want to pursue this is not just for ourselves.
Right.
We want to pursue it for the benefit of other people.
That's it.
And I love what you talked about in your book about a byproduct of this process. And a byproduct of this process is influence. And what you said, it's on page 91, you said, influence is created when others see and respect the purpose and the discipline of our day-to-day lives, that day in, day out. Talk to us a little bit more about your thoughts on that, the influence that this self-leadership has on the lives of people that we know and that we love.
Yeah. And I will, but first, if you're watching this, just FYI, Dave is probably one of the most prepared podcast hosts I have ever seen. No kidding. Like page numbers and everything. Like that's awesome. Good for you. You didn't just skim the book. Like you legit read it. So I think to answer your question, I think what happens when people start to see us disciplining ourselves over and over and over again and being able to keep our promises to ourselves and being able to keep promises of the people, suddenly that level of consistency makes us uncommon. You said it earlier. So you make a New Year's resolution in January. 80% of people quit by February. Yeah. To be in the 20%, you just have to make it to April, right?
Right.
And people are like, wow, you don't have to make it half the year, And that kind of influence then is really compelling. Then you're the type of person who can turn around and help others because they're like, well, I didn't make it to April. Yeah. How did you do that? And so I think when you're able to be consistent, especially in the season that we're in and the culture that we're in, consistency gets you further than almost anything else. Just don't quit. And then people will say, how did you do that?
Yeah, and I think for the people, like for parents out there and business leaders, whatever, and you're a Christian, you're a follower of Jesus Christ, when they see that consistency in your life, they can see that you're reliable and that they can trust you. And so whenever you engage with them on something, they know, okay, Dave or Dan or whoever, they're going to be with me on this. They're not going to let me down because I see these things happening in his life on a regular basis that shows me that he's a guy who's going to be there for me.
Exactly right. If he can do this in his own life for himself when no one else is relying on him, he's just doing it for himself, sure, he can do it for me too.
Yeah,
that's good.
All right. So here's where the rubber meets the road. Yep. How do we get started on this? I mean, there has to be a first step. We have these steps of on the pathway, the steps to self-leadership. Give us something initial to do now if we're going to embark on that journey, and how do we stick with it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick two things that you can do. The first one is to find your formula. That's really important. So if you're trying to do something different, you're trying to do something new, it's challenging. Understand that there's going to be a formula that you have to follow that is unique to you. Whether it's parenting, whether it's building a business, whether it's reading the Bible, you're made in a specific way. And so being able to find the right combination of when I do it, how I do it, what tools I use, where I go, like all those things, that's really important. And it's important to be able to go through the process of figuring out what it'll take to get you to be consistent. So don't be afraid to try new things in order to get to the habit and the routine that you need in order to reach that level of excellence. So be okay with try different pens, or I have to try different versions of the Bible, or I have to try different gyms, or I have to go through that process and be okay with experimentation. That's important.
I like that. Yeah. All right. Find your formula.
Find your formula. The second thing is, and this is an example I've used in a lot of different ways, excellence really is built one step at a time. And so if you want to get to a place where you're really living out the vision that you believe God's given you, and you're the kind of person that God's called you to be, know that it happens one step at a time. And a great example of this is really having a stack of paper on your table. And there's a high stack of paper, and everybody wants that big old stack where it's obvious and it's clear, and everyone's like, wow, look at that stack of paper. But in reality, you don't build a stack of paper unless you have one small sheet at a time. And so really your habits are built one sheet at a time, day after day after day after day. And by the time you're done, you have a 20-pound stack, but you know that that's built one sheet of paper at a time, and there's no other way to do it. It's one step at a time, consistently over a long period of time, gets the results that you want. So no quick fixes, no instant results, no, hey, we'll do this in 90 days.
Right.
None of that. It's every single day, focused and disciplined.
That's really good. And celebrating those little wins along the way.
That's right.
I heard someone say one time, I don't know who originally said this, but we tend to overestimate what we can do in a short period of time and underestimate what we can do in a long period of time. You know, they don't give lifetime achievement awards out to people who've only been in their profession or what it is for like 3 weeks.
That's right.
It's
That's
like,
right.
no, there's a trajectory that they had in their life. There's that consistent day in. There's pages that they're adding to their stack, day after day after day, and eventually their life has the influence that they hoped that it eventually have for the benefit of other people, not necessarily for themselves, but for the benefit of other people. And those are rewarding times for sure.
Really good.
Yeah,
those are rewarding times, and they're hard earned, and they were given a long time ago, and you stayed focused and you kept the journey, and God rewarded you in the end. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah. So one more next step is for people to get the book. Authentic Leadership.
There you go. That's right.
I need to have you sign mine before you leave here today. So for your next book.
That's good.
Do you have one? Do you have another book in mind?
You know, actually right now, no. Well, there's an idea. It's
Arc of Leadership. How about that?
That's it. Yeah, it's about influence. I'm working on it right now, but there's a lot of other things to finish before I get there.
Good.
So
Good. Well, it's been great having you here. Thank you.
Fun. Thanks, Dave.
Anything else you want to add to our time here?
No, this is fun. I mean, I love the idea of discipline in regards to spiritual life. And it's one of those things where I think God makes it hard on purpose, you know, because I think it forms us and it shapes us. So let's not act as if it's ever not going to be hard. It's hard because he wants it to be, and we need to lean into that. It's okay.
Yeah, and I think the things that one thing I want to remind everybody about that you said very early on, vision is important. Have a vision for where you want to go. What do you want? If I stay with this for X period of time, for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, what will my life look like? I think that vision is really, really important. Otherwise, I think that the discipline that it takes to get there, it will fall by the wayside. You will become a statistic then, right?
Yes, yeah. There's this old story, and I'll say this real quick and then I'll be done. There's this old anecdote that people have used, I've used it before too, about where people tend to quit in a marathon. Maybe you've heard it before. Oftentimes people think marathon is, 26.1, 26.2 miles, is that what it is? Yeah. And so you're running a marathon, people tend to think, oh, you quit probably at 25 miles because you've been at it for so long. Well, that's not the reality. People tend to quit a marathon at like mile 19 because you've come so far that you're super tired, but you're too far from the finish line. You forgot why you even started. And you're thinking to yourself, I can't see the end. I forgot why I even started. I'm in the middle. This is horrible. I quit. So being able to keep that vision in front of you is absolutely key.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
And thanks to all of you who have listened in. Appreciate that. And we trust that what we've talked about today has been a value add for you in your own spiritual life as you take the next steps in your spiritual journey to the full life that Jesus has for you. If you don't have a church home, you're certainly welcome to join us at Grace. You can go to graceforohio.org, learn about our service times, our streaming times, and jump on there. And I really think that it will be a benefit to your life. Remember that Jesus came that you might have life and have it to the full. Our prayer is that you pursue the full life that Jesus has for you.